Hello, everyone, and welcome in. My name is Bryce Koon as we talk Haynes King and Georgia Tech tonight. It should be a fun show. Welcome in. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you're listening after the fact, whether that's on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or you're hanging out here on the YouTube channel, maybe you didn't get to watch it live, we appreciate you as well. Tonight's episode, can Haynes King make the jump? We take a look at some of the things that made him good in 2023, some of the things he needs to correct, and try to project what are some of the big changes that need to happen and for him and this Georgia Tech offense to be better in 2024. We'll see you here in just a second.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The crowded booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.
No, I'm just kidding. We don't have to listen to it again. But hey, we appreciate you joining in. My name is Bryce Koon as we talk here on Storm Talk every single Tuesday night. That's at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. We appreciate you being along for the ride. If you want to catch other shows, other episodes, you can find us over on the YouTube at the Crowded Booth. You like that, Ralph? The YouTube. We used to have a health teacher that used to call it the YouTube. But it is what it is. Hey, we appreciate you. Like the video. Subscribe to the channel because it's completely free for you to do, and you get to join in some great conversation. If you're watching or listening to this and you want to join just a great, we'll call it fraternity of sports conversation, make sure you join that Discord, completely free for you to join, where we drop some nuggets, we drop some news, but also we have a good time in talking college football as well. All right, let's rock and roll. We're going to take this. It's going to be interesting. I want to get your comments in there. Ralph's going to be in the background. He's going to star some of your comments as we talk about Haynes King. And we really honestly talk about this in the sense of what has to improve, what can be improved. And I think in order for us to kind of get to this point, let's talk about where we were 365 days ago. 365 days ago, this Georgia Tech program was in an interesting spot. A lot of people had clamored, obviously, for Zach Pyron to be the starting quarterback due to the feel-good mentality that you felt towards the end of Key's interim era, we can call that. And look, for good reason. Zach Pyron was a guy that instilled a level of toughness. He embodied what Brent Key wanted out of this roster, wanted out of this team. And as I fix my mic here, I think with what we talk about in what this quarterback position needed, you could even go back further. Georgia Tech's quarterback room has been less than desirable at the Power 5 level, less than desirable at the Group of 5 level coming into 2023. So 325 days ago, I did 325 because that was technically as where you kind of got into the post-spring practice. You knew you had Haynes King. You had Zach Gibson now at Georgia State. You had some guys that had some experience, but we really didn't know what the situation was going to look like in terms of, is Haynes King going to be the same guy that struggled in his last year with the Aggies, dealt with some injuries, was never really 100% healthy when they really wanted to make, some moves over there in College Station? Did Jimbo Fisher, hurt the development of Haynes King rather than help it as kind of this perceived quarterback guru, this perceived quarterback whisperer? Look, there's a lot of different aspects and a lot of different points that you could make with that. But I think as we take a look at 365 days ago, we also have to understand you kind of have been in quarterback purgatory ever since the infamous the switch, the move from the triple option into the modern day spread, running gun, whatever you want to call any type of offense that is, used across college football now. You've kind of been in quarterback purgatory. You've had some talent, but you've either had a lack of consistency. You have had arguably you have had just overall a group that has just kind of struggled to really maintain solid footing and showing any type of consistency. And that's not a knock on anyone specific. It's just kind of where we've sat with this quarterback room over the past 5-6 years. So I think with Haynes King coming in and playing and kind of looking back at the 2023, some people perceive this as a, glass half empty look, and they're going to get on to you about it. But I think that we take this and we can be happy about the progress that was made at the quarterback position. but we also kind of saw what it looks like to have just kind of consistent play at this position. Just having a competent level of going through reads, being able to be a playmaker, and not being held back by your quarterback play. That's really kind of what we saw in 2023. Could we have necessarily seen that with a Zach Pyron? Maybe so, if Haynes King never made the decision, which, by the way, crazy to think about how close Haynes King was to not coming to Georgia Tech. Could have been an Arizona State Sun Devil, which is a wild, wild thought to see him suiting up out there. That's just crazy to think about. But that's kind of where I sit with this, because why there is excitement, and there should be, and the guy had a good season. We also have to understand that what Georgia Tech was just getting back to a spot overall as a program and being best way to put it is just being at a spot where you feel comfortable to go now lift off, getting back to a sense of normalcy. It's kind of what Haynes King brought to the table. He showed you flashes of why you think people think he can be a top 15, top 20 quarterback in the country, but also showed flashes of he's got a lot of things to improve on. And the development aspect didn't really transpire during the early portion of his career. And now here in the back half, Georgia Tech has the chance to, as a program like Georgia Tech might have to do continuously in the future, of finding a guy with uber amounts of talent, goes to a bigger name program, comes to you, and really starts to figure it out. That also turns the tide in recruiting as well for you to be able to get some of those guys more up front going forward. So I think that when you see what King brings to the table, we look at, obviously, some of the numbers that Haynes King had in 2020, 2023, and I'll read some of them to you here. This is the biggest thing, and it's a calling card that a lot of people are holding on to. I had the chance to watch Jaden Daniels, the Heisman Trophy winner, up close and personal for, all through fall camp, and then get to see what the tail of the tape that he put, just together, and it was tremendous. Obviously, the stat that's been thrown around, Georgia Tech Athletic Association did a great job of this. Kudos to them. Haynes King was one of only two players in the country this year with at least 2,700 passing yards, 600 rushing yards, and 25 touchdown passes and 5 touchdown runs. It was he and Jane Daniels. And a lot of people just look at that and they just say, well, I mean, look what he did. Look how he was able to just put up numbers similar and really in the only statistical category, the only level, as the Heisman Trophy winner on an SEC team that, in a 12-team playoff might have made it. So, wow, let's, hand clap. Let's do that. Let's give kudos to that. However, I do want to say this too, and it might go back to kind of push across my point in a different way here. And you might say, well, Bryce, you're contradicting yourself. But you can use statistics and numbers to frame the narrative however you might be. And this show here is not to talk about that Haynes King didn't have a good 2023. Yeah, he had a good 2023. The things to improve on, yes. Was it a good thing that he came into Georgia Tech, came into Atlanta, provided stability to a position that's been in the dark ages for the past 5-6 years? Heck yes, hands down, yes. But what we've kind of seen from all of this is that King and his ability to make plays was a difference maker. In some ways, the way that Jaden Daniels did for LSU. Those numbers are not incorrect. He led the ACC in touchdown passes, was 4th in passing yards, and obviously the numbers have been out there that this is one of the biggest offensive turnarounds in 2023 that we've seen to date from 2022 to 2023. Give credit where credit's due. However, there are some numbers that when you start to kind of look at this, that Jaden Daniels, and I don't even want to say this because it's I just don't think it's fair. The loose term of comparison that this stat provides, those numbers provide, when you really dig deep into it, it shows that you can kind of use stats to prove whatever point that you want, and that's fine. But Haynes King threw 16 interceptions. That was tied for second in the country last year. We're going to get into that in a second. You look at some of the other quarterbacks that were kind of in that top 25 range or top 20 range or near that had success. Oh, hey, Ralph. How you doing, brother? That had success. Ralph didn't mean to do that. Alan Bowman for Oklahoma State. That's last year. Devin Leary threw 12 for Kentucky last year. Jack Plummer, who Georgia Tech faced, threw 12 for Louisville. Tyler Van Dyke threw 12 for Miami. Talia Tagovailoa threw 11 for Maryland. Michael Penix was in the national title game. He threw 11 for Washington last year. You kind of start to go down that list, and you kind of run out of the big ones. Will Howard threw 10, but now you're entering territory where it's a jumbled mess, really, between ranks of 23 and starting to go down to like into the 60s. But really, there was one quarterback, Davis Brin from Georgia Southern, who threw 19 interceptions last year. And then you have Haynes King sitting there tied with Braden Fowler and Nicolosi from Colorado State. They're both with 16 interceptions. I'm going to just do like a Command F here, and I'm having to go through this. Jaden Daniels isn't even – Ralph, you could get this. Gunnar Watson threw 6 interceptions, by the way, last year, Ralph. How many interceptions did Jaden Daniels throw? We can't hear you, Ralph. It's okay. You can look at interceptions Jaden Daniels threw. Ralph will get that stat for me here in just a second and put it in the private chat. The next stat I like to look at is, and this is going to get into where I think he has to improve, is the yards per pass thrown. Essentially, how often are you pushing the ball down the field? That determines explosiveness. Jaden Daniels led the country in 11.7 yards per pass thrown. He was one of the best. When you bring it back down to King, quick stat show here. Haynes King is in the 50s, I believe. Slow on the stats. Yep, Haynes King is number 50 at 7.7. Nearly 4 yards less. Ralph's got that stat for him, by the way. Jane Daniels threw 4 interceptions. So higher risk in terms of how much we're throwing the ball down the field, less interceptions. The next one is quarterback rating. Haynes King had 142.2. That was tied for 53rd with actually a guy in Garrett Green who was deemed as a top 15 quarterback. So it'll be very interesting. Jay Daniels 208. I mean, the guy dominated Heisman Level season. All I'm sitting there to tell you that tonight is that the stat that's been thrown around and people cling on to that, well, look what he's done. He's the only player other than Jay Daniels to do X, Y, and Z. Yeah, but he did it with more mistakes. He did it with, less risk in terms of less ability to throw the ball down the field effectively in terms of, yardage, in terms of, and then overall quarterback rating, which a lot of those numbers are kind of baked into that. So once again, I'm not saying all that to say that he's not a good quarterback or that he can't be a top 15 quarterback in the country. What I'm saying is that you have to be kind of careful and read them between the lines and look a little bit deeper to form your opinion rather than just taking things at face value. Because yes, those numbers that he posted that are in the same category as Jane Daniels, those are very, very good. It's promising for an offense that needs to be very, very good in 2024. It does not necessarily mean, though, that he's just going to take this magical step and be an elite quarterback in college football. It doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be able to reproduce that numbers without some of the casualty numbers that he had in interceptions and that yards per throw. So I think that, and I see it down in the comments below, the PFF grades, we're going to get into that to a second, and I'm going to detail some of this stuff that we will kind of, look at. So there's that. I also want to get into this more conversation too, and it's going to take us into the second topic, Ralph. If you look under that Swarm Talk thing, we have the 3 bullet points. We're looking at analyzing Kings 2023. The interceptions is something that people really want to hound on. And it goes into this idea of decision-making. Folks, this is going to be it seems like it's going to be just something completely easy to sit here and talk about. Like, oh, of course, like he has to be a better decision maker, Bryce. You're just, this is a layup type of point you're making. But within having better decision making is being decisive of when, where, that you're going to go with the football. Kings struggle with that at times, and we can have the conversation about a worse supporting cast, all these other things. I'll just tell you this. One of the biggest growth components of talking with people in the LSU camp, talking with people around the Daniels camp, was the jump that he made in terms of decisiveness. Both are really, really good athletes. Daniels is probably faster. I'm not trying to play a comparison game between Jane Daniels and Haynes King here, but I'm telling you, That was the maturation, is the decisiveness, the conviction in which he made his decisions. So the argument of the supporting cast wasn't as good, he was having to play from behind and all that type of stuff too. I'm just going to tell you, elite quarterbacks don't put their teams further into a hole. Great quarterbacks don't put their teams further into a hole. So I'm sure that's something, and he would say too, that that's something that you have to be able to cut out, but at what cost? Does it not let you throw for that 2,700-yard mark? Does that you threw for? Does it not let you make some of the decisions down the field that you did because now you're going to play a little more conservative? And a lot of that's going to be determined on the play calling. But the decisiveness in which Haynes King plays with is going to be the number one biggest thing for any type of statistical growth and overall offensive and team growth that this Georgia Tech team makes in 2024. The schedule's obviously very, very hard. We'll obviously get later into it as the rosters become more concrete of what we're going to see on the field and the gridiron there in the fall. But just as of right now, something that you can get into the lab, you can get into the room, you can get into the film room and do is this is a group, this is a guy that is going to have to be a focal point of an offense. He's going to have to be the straw that stirs the drink for Buster Faulkner's scheme. And you're going to have to make some changes in how deliberate you are about what you're doing. When you're losing to a Clemson and the game is, I don't remember what the score was, but the game's a 28 to 12, 28 to 10 or whatever, and you're being forced to kind of go down the field. It's not an excuse that's acceptable to throw the interception. I understand where that argument's coming from. If we've got to be more aggressive and teams might know what you want to do. Yeah, agreed. Hands down. Like that makes complete 110% sense. But it's going to be something too. And Rap's point of he also had 4 rushing fumbles as well, putting the ball on the ground. So I think that and once again, it could just be something that is, crazy to kind of think about. Bottom line, efficiency and how he's going to dictate what he's going to do in the football field is going to make the biggest difference. And so it brings us to some of the PFF grades. And on, exclusive partnerships, bygones be bygones here, you start to kind of look at some of the well-graded games and even the, elite category games that he had. So by PFF's grades, I'll let you in on this. So like total offensively, this was the best season by far that Haynes King had in college football. 2022 was a disaster for him. Didn't play as much. 2021, he had a nice little decent year. And then his freshman year and that COVID year, he was okay. Ralph, Zach Calzada upset Alabama, not Haynes King, right? With A&M. Okay, yeah. So I just wanted to kind of put this in here. You go into that game against Louisville, and the PFF grades say that was about a mid-average game that you could play. Like he didn't do a lot of bad things, but he didn't do a lot of amazing things. And if you go back and look at it, and I'm going to get to what I think makes him special in the third segment here, but he's allowing his players to play in space, playing a point guard role. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Then you move on to South Carolina State. He receives a 72 grade for that one. It jumps up from the 64. There we go, Jonesy right there. Jumps up from the 64, and Ralph's going to star your comments because I want to bring this conversation at the end of the show into this. You go on the road at Ole Miss, folks, and I think it'd be interesting to see what the PFF grades were against Ole Miss's defense this year. It was actually a way better defense than I think people are accustomed to Ole Miss having. Pete Golding did a pretty good job, actually, in Oxford this past year. At Ole Miss, a 71.5. So once again, he's a big reason. He's a big reason why you're able to do some things. You go to Wake, actually technically a worse game per the PFF there at 69.1. Bowling Green, Haynes King had a 76.4 grade in that game, 82 grade, which was his second highest of the season on the ground as a runner. You go to Miami, and this is the game that a lot of people like to talk about, the ifs, ands, and buts of the college football world. 53.5 and 42.3 over as a passer, he graded out in that Miami game. That's not good. Like, that's bad. And so didn't play well on the road at Miami, but you still found a way to win. And I get that's all that matters. Come back to Boston College, North Carolina, played great, 74-75. The Virginia game was technically his best game, an elite performance in terms of his ability to pass the football, was his best one at 77.2 grade, and then an 84.2 grade running the ball, and he actually finished with an 88.5 PFF grade for that Virginia game on the road. When you went to Clemson, once again, nobody played well. That was due to just a better up front team, a better better front. And Clemson, make fun of Clemson all you want, but 50.7 overall grade. There's an offensive guy, 50.1 through the air, 57.4 on the ground. You get back to Syracuse, another high-level elite performance, 87.6, 81.9 through the air, 74. Georgia, all things considered, you didn't get blown out in that game. You competed, but it was one of King's, statistically, per the PFF grades. Now, look, you can like PFF grades. I'm just providing that as another opportunity for you to see it. 65 overall offensive grade there for King, 63 on through the air, 61.8 through on the ground. And in the bowl game, he gets back up into that nice echelon there with a 78.7 or 78.6 grade, 68.5 through the air, and 72.4 on the ground. That was a lot, and you're not going to remember it, and that's completely okay. I'll post it in the Discord, and we can have some good banter and conversation about that. But what I do want to kind of bring to the table here is of what they were able to do. When you look at the game with inside the game, okay, so his best performances came against South Carolina State, Ole Miss, Bowling Green, Boston College, North Carolina, Virginia, Syracuse, UCF. That's 8 on the board. And you won nearly every single one except for Ole Miss and Bowling Green and Boston College. Still cannot believe that Georgia Tech lost to Boston College. Wild. So you lost 3 of those games. The games that he didn't necessarily play as a high level or a good to great quarterback were Louisville, Wake, technically, which you won per the PFF grade, Miami, which you won, Clemson, which you lost, and Georgia. So you kind of see on both sides of the aisle, it's not all predicated on what he's able to do. But I think that when you look at what King was, if you're going to go based off these numbers, if you're going to go based off the stats that the GTAA wants to throw out there, and then if you're going to want to go look at Football Reference and go look at these stats and kind of look into what it was, in 2023, Haynes King was a average to good quarterback. And the reason that the excitement level is off the charts and is well-deserved, it's because of this idea of hope that this fan base has. They have not had a quarterback show competent level play at this position under the center in a long time. And that's fine. There's some things that have to improve. Decision-making is one of them, folks. You cannot throw 16 interceptions to be a top 20 quarterback in the country. You just can't do that. You cannot put your team further into a hole to climb back out of and be a top 20 quarterback. Now, this isn't a message directed at Chris Winkie, at Buster Faulkner, Haynes King, or any of those people. It's more of a message directed to the people who want to say that, well, yeah, of course he's going to be great. Okay, we get to that. The decision-making's got to be better. The thought process has to be better. When we're down, not forcing the ball into situations, into tight windows, into low percentage opportunities necessarily at the time. Now, do receivers' hands need to get better? Yes. Do routes need to get better? Does the offensive line need to get better? Yes. And it takes us into the final topic of tonight's show. Next bullet point, please. Offensive unit has to take a step too. If Haynes King is going to be a top 20 quarterback, a good to great, and a great to elite quarterback in the country, this whole offense has to move forward. Because here's the thing, and you can go back to, good friend Chris Hummer did a great article on this over at 24/7 talking about the resurgence, John King and, wanting to lay off not having a quarterback coach and all these type of things with Jeff Christensen, the former NFL quarterback who founded the organization Throw It Deep. He's worked with Mahomes, Garoppolo, Cousins, Quinn Ewers in the college ranks. All of these things with King. This is where I think King enters 2024. He's got confidence, not only in his team, not only in the scheme, but in himself. And you go back and watch and look at some of the interviews that Haynes King kind of put together, and it was, and when he talked to the media, and one of the big things you were kind of able to take away was this is a guy who kind of had really been beaten down mentally, also physically, but really mentally too during his time in College Station. Is that going to change? I'll tell you this right now. I think it has. The throwing motion had become completely elongated. It had really kind of become a meme, a joke. I mean, Ralph, wouldn't we say the Haynes King throwing motion before he got to Tech was kind of a meme? It was really, really weird. Obviously, the footwork wasn't there. You saw him to start to get more comfortable as he got more into what Buster Faulkner and Brent Key wanted out of this offense and Chris Weinke. There's a reason for hope, and that's a legitimate idea of hope. Your second year in the system, your second year with these guys, the development. As 2024 rolls along and we get into spring ball and we get into all these things, and Dennis brings in a very, very good point here that I'll go ahead and put up, and we'll get to comments later. I think having an offensive identity helps too, 110% hands down. You didn't have that. Eric Singleton has to take a jump. Number 13 in white and gold is not going to be a surprise to anybody in 2024. Teams are going to scheme to take him out of the play. How do we address the other ways? Offensive line. Is that going to be a thing where you see continued growth, or does it stagnate to where it was last year? Average to good. But if you start to look at some of the elite quarterbacks in college football, people want to make the excuse, well, of course they're that good. They have weapons. Okay, but that's how football works. Great teams make great plays. Great surrounding cast makes a great quarterback look well. You don't have quarterbacks that just win the game by themselves. It's not a sustainable method, and it should not be where Georgia Tech fans want this, place to go in terms of just having an all-star level quarterback, an all-conference level quarterback, and a poor supporting cast. So no, they have to take more steps. This offensive line has to get better. You're going to have to find a running back to complement Jamal Haynes to help Haynes King alleviate off that. Brent Key said as much after that Boston College game. We have to help him. We have to help him be better. Because you saw in situations at Clemson against Boston College when King had to press and felt like he had to do it by himself, mistakes happened. And that's not just a Haynes King thing, folks. That was a Jeff Sims problem. That's a problem across all college football. When your supporting cast isn't good enough, and or when you feel like you have to win a game by yourself constantly, that's going to wear and tear on you. You might have some fun moments. You might have some fun games. But, folks, we're going to need to see this whole group as a unit take a step forward. The wide receiving core is going to have to get better. And I'll tell you this, too. Buster Faulkner is going to have to get better. Chris Weinke is going to have to get better. These are all guys that are growing together, both on the staff, in that room, in the film room, all of what they're trying to do. They're trying to take the next step as a program. You have to do that offensively. 2023 was fun and fine. The 2024 schedule is not going to be easy, regardless of what your opinion of certain programs are going to be. We've already saw going into last year, nothing is for sure, and you can't really predict what's going to happen, especially when you get to ACC play. Experience doesn't always equal better. Georgia Tech fans learned that very early on. There has to be growth. There has to be constant improvement overall as a roster, overall in roster management, overall in development, and that's where you're going to see this coaching staff being worth the dollar they're being paid. Because if Haynes King rolls into 2024 and he finishes with numbers, similar to let's just say a 2,900 passing yards, 800 rushing yards, 23 touchdowns, but he has like 14 or 15 interceptions, you're going to say, you know what? He was a solid college quarterback for us. He got Georgia Tech back to the spot they needed to be in terms of being a stable program. Now, can he be one of the top quarterbacks in the country? There's going to be a lot of room for development, and a lot of it's going to depend on the supporting cast. But you can't take out the factors and stats that you don't want to hear, that you don't want to recognize just to prove your point. And that's what we started off the show with, talking about that. So overall, King has to improve that decisiveness. The group around him has to be better. And the last key part of this, where we talk about the offensive unit, is it comes down to scheme. They've got to be even more innovative. When you saw Haynes King at his best last year, it's being a point guard. They're going to have to mix in the deep ball. 110% understand that, and I agree with that. But his speed in and around the pocket awareness, and his ability to let his athletes go make plays in space is going to be massive. Faulkner's seen a year of it, but other teams have also seen a year of it. So what I'm saying is that last year Tech was a relative unknown. You had no clue what this group was going to be. As the season, people started to make adjustments. Coming into 2024, you had the book is necessarily not all the way out, but a couple chapters have been written of what Buster Faulkner at Georgia Tech wants to look like and what Haynes King's game is going into 2024. He's not going to change overnight into some other type of quarterback. I don't believe that. I think there's very few quarterbacks in the country that have the ability to do that, much less actually do it. But what I do think is that as defenses scheme against this, come up with new ideas to, again, this attack different areas of the Georgia Tech offense, they have to be willing to make adjustments as well. And so all of these factors hinge a lot on what we're going to see out of Haynes King. It's going to be very interesting to watch because the success of this team, I've got question marks defensively, as they should be. And we'll see those question marks might be answered after spring ball. They might be answered going into fall camp or after the fact. But what I'll tell you is that offensively, they're going to have to carry a lot of the load because I don't know if they've done enough defensively from a personnel standpoint to really feel super comfortable about where this group is. So Haynes King's going to feel the pressure, and you welcome the pressure. You welcome all those things. But his development, and especially the mental side, the decisiveness to keep your team in a game, and really, to understand you can take a sack. You can throw the ball out of bounds. Live to see another play. Live to see another down so that in turn, maybe your defense gets a stop and you got the ball right back instead of going down 2 or 3 scores. It's going to be very, very interesting to see, where this whole thing goes. We got a couple comments in the chat that we'll get to, but I think, you kind of see how I feel about this. I think Haynes King can be a top 20 quarterback in college football. He's going to have to clean up a lot of things in order for that to happen. The problem is assuming that it won't happen based off what you saw last year is a wrong assessment, and assuming that it will happen because we just think of progress as linear constant or as this constant linear platform. That's not how stuff works either. There's bends, there's breaks. Next year could be worse. Next year could be better. Next year could be about the same. No one really knows, but a lot of people just like to say that they're right after the fact because hindsight's 2020. So we'll see. We'll see. All right, Ralph, we'll get to a couple of the comments here before we get out of here tonight. Appreciate you. Rambling on with Zach Jones says he needs to make serious improvement in 2024. In reality, he has to if we want to make a bowl. Too hard of a schedule for dumb turnovers and mistakes. That's a fair comment right there. Very fair comment. Louis says most of King's touchdowns came when he was trying to force things to come from behind. A better defense will allow him to be more relaxed. Hopefully, Winky's also fix some of the decision making. And I'm pretty sure, here that Louis is talking about, and we're gonna get we're gonna get that flavor Yasso tonight. I'll let you know. I got the. I got to get to Klingles. So Ralph, get rid of Louis real quick. Tonight we went with fudge brownie. Absolutely phenomenal. Fudge brownie is a solid one. Nice chocolatey exterior with a hint of chewy fudge in the middle. Phenomenal. All right, so appreciate you there, Klingle. We'll go back to whatever. What was that one, Ralph? Okay. So Louis said most of King's touchdowns came when he was trying to force things. We saw that comment. This is one of the things for me where it's kind of like we were talking about earlier. Yes and no. Yes, things can be helped by that, but the idea, because folks, that's a real thing for quarterbacks. Mentally, when your defense can't stop anybody, you start to press. That I'm telling you one thing, I don't care what anyone tells you, that's what happened to Jeff Sims. Like Jeff Sims had talent. Jeff Sims had the ability to play at this level. They were so bad. And look, there's a lot of things that were wrong in the development of that. That's what happened to him. Tried to play hero ball constantly, and that's what happened. That's what you don't want to happen with Haynes King because he's got a higher floor than Sims, maybe a higher ceiling too, but I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to see. All right, next comment here. We keep it rocking and rolling. Also, Palmer Toms. Ralph, that's an amazing comment that you just threw in the private chat that I just saw. Palmer Toms, registered Georgia fan, just absolutely just bombing my My text messages. All right, I blame Haynes King for maybe 10 to 12 interceptions. With the fact that Penix threw 11 without all the dumb faults, makes me think King's top 24 in the country. I think there's a lot of other things that go into that. Interceptions is a massive ability, but this thing too, we play the if, ands, buts game. Like you could probably, if you're going to say that, then maybe Penix really didn't throw 11. Maybe he threw really 7 interceptions. I'm not saying all 16 are on him. Interceptions are on him. You just can't do that. The excuse of throwing an interception because you're down, well, it didn't hurt us anyway because we were down by 10, 15 points. Yeah, but you can't do that. Like it doesn't help you to do things like that. And just chalking, this is what gets on my nerves. Folks just chalking any bad decision as, oh, that's not a big deal. We're not going to worry about that. I'm not saying Zach's doing this here, but that's an idea or a theme that I've seen kind of generate among the fan base. That's not real. Like, if you're going to praise the good things, praise the good things. If you're going to look at the bad things, look at the bad things too. Next comment, we keep it rolling here too, as we rock and roll here on a Tuesday night. Mr. Singh, he also did with the worst supporting cast and also against inferior opponents. Those two might cancel each other out. Keep it rolling through the comments section here. Brennan Simpkins, have not heard from you in a while. Simpkins, he got to look at different receivers, not just Singleton. I guess the line depends on that as well. Yeah, I mean, it's internal clock. If that internal clock gets messed up early in the season, that's going to be tough. Got to be very, very tough. If King can clean up his interceptions, he has to drop to 8 or below, and defense can get 50% better tech, can have a special year. Not a completely wrong assessment there. Very interesting to see. We have noted Georgia fan just hopping in. Are we bringing him in to talk about Haynes King? You know what? We will. After this, let me get through these comments real quick, and we'll bring him in. I want Palmer's assessment of this as well. And he's just repping the brand also too tonight, which is wild. Absolutely wild. Ralph, any more comments or was that it? That's it? All right, we're bringing in noted Georgia fan, Palmer Toms. Palmer, we're talking Haynes King tonight. Can he be a top 20 quarterback? You were in the building in Atlanta in Bobby Dodd for that game. We were looking at PFF rankings. That was technically one of his worst games where Georgia Tech really competed. Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think.
Yeah, I was going to say the kid can play. That's for sure.
Your thoughts on him, though?
No, I mean, look, Georgia Tech gave Georgia hell. You know, that offense seemed to be clicking on all cylinders late in the season. And yeah, I mean, they gave Georgia, albeit a banged up Georgia defense, one that didn't have a, starting inside linebacker in Jamon Dumas-Johnson, a banged up Smile Monday, but gave those guys a lot of trouble. And Haynes King was a big part of the reason the Buster Faulkner system to get him using his legs certainly gave Georgia some trouble that night in Atlanta. That night, that is weird to say in this route.
It is. No, you're right. It is. No, I mean, look, I'm looking at the offensive grades. He graded out as a 65 in that game. That was his third lowest on the season.
I would not have guessed that.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I know you're also a big UNC guy, which I don't think a lot of people know. But it's and look, Joe, look, this guy right here has already said, "Who cares what Palmer thinks?" He doesn't.
I mean, look,
you didn't know you were joining tonight. I don't think. I don't even know what you.
Even folks on Dogs HQ shouldn't care what I
think. But I mean, look. So we're talking about this. When you saw like what Faulkner did with Stetson, which I know a lot of other things went into that Munkin, but Faulkner had obviously was able to contribute in that sense. Like, I think there's some similarities in their game. Just how mobile they get moving around. Ralph says he cares, but how and I know Tech fans will be like, we hate Stetson Bennett, but I just think there's some similarities in the sense of getting them moving around the pocket and using their athleticism.
If Haynes King can play to a Stetson Bennett 2022 level, in 2024, they are going to be a really competitive team. And you're right. Buster certainly had a lot to do with Stetson's development. I don't know if Stetson was supposed to say this or not, but he did. And I was there. So, and it's public knowledge now. Yeah. Buster was very involved with Stetson. And yeah. I don't know as a, quality control analyst, off-field type role, how much of a role he was supposed to have. But he was very involved with Stetson because Monken was the head coach of the offense. Buster essentially became the quarterback's coach, and worked with Stetson a lot that year. So, yeah, I mean the way that Georgia used Stetson and used his legs, I think that's what gave Georgia the most trouble, this past season, and Haynes King, and Georgia Tech found a way to give Georgia trouble by using that extra element of the game, because it's really difficult to defend a quarterback that has that versatility to him, because it adds in, the old saying is, well, you get an extra hat, an extra blocker if your quarterback's the ball carrier, and that's certainly the case. And so I think Georgia fans' big concern and going into 2023 was, well, what about that lost element of the run game with the quarterback? And I think Carson Beck showed enough athleticism. But I think that, we're talking about somebody that is really athletic and can make plays and can extend plays in Haynes King.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what he does in 2024. Obviously, Palmer, my biggest thing is, and this will be the last thing, and we'll end the show because I had no clue you were coming on. But I think Ralph just threw you an invite. It is, it's interesting, but let's, we have people just very upset. But hey, look, we're talking about a guy that was in the building watching Haynes King, okay, and talking about Buster Faulkner, who came from Georgia to Tech, but my thought process is here too, Palmer, with experience doesn't always mean better. Like just because you have experience does not mean that you're just going to, this idea of growth is just on this linear path of where you just exponentially get better. For some programs, it might be. I don't think Georgia Tech's on that. I think there has to be some, decisiveness. There has to be some decision-making aspects of what King needs to do to make him better. I said this earlier. You can't throw 16 interceptions regardless of any type of situation and be a top 20 quarterback in the country. It's just not really what you can do. They need to be able to push the ball more down the field. But look, I mean, it's a very hard schedule. Wanted to get your thoughts, though, as we wrap it up here. With a guy like Haynes King, what was the reception of Georgia fans? Because I don't think we've asked you this live yet, of that Tech game. Like on your message board, like was there a sense of, you know what, kudos to Brent Key? Like that was, or was it more of an embarrassment? Like what for you? What was that? What was that like?
I think going into that game, Georgia fans were probably not necessarily nervous about Haynes, but having seen what Auburn did to Georgia, and the way that Peyton Thorne and that offense utilized his legs, there was some hesitation about that game, and I think that seeing the way that things played out, there's certainly a tip your cap, and I think Georgia at that point in the year, it was such a we've got to win this next one against Alabama, and we've got to get healthy, and that was the big concern. But I do think that there was maybe something that was exposed in that Georgia defense a little bit, with its ability to protect against the quarterback run, because all SEC championship week, it was, hey, what can Jalen Milroe do with his legs against Georgia? That didn't end up being a huge factor. Georgia game planned pretty well for that. And, kudos to them for making Milroe beat them with his arm. But, I think that there was certainly a respect for, a Tech football team that was very competitive with Georgia for the first time in quite some time.
Yeah, fair enough. And I think it is a rivalry that both sides would say this needs to get back to feeling like one. It really does. And so 2023 was a really good year to kind of maybe kickstart some more competitive games in the future. Palmer Tom's Dogs HQ had no clue that he was joining, but Ralph just set that up. But we'll talk after the show. Hey, my name's Bryce Koon. Thanks so much for tuning in. Talking Haynes King. Do I think he can be a great quarterback? Yeah, I think that he can be a really great quarterback. Things have to change. Now, for all honesty, if you're watching this and you're like, what the heck was that? Like, what just happened? Why do we just have a guy in a Georgia shirt just pop on the show? I don't know. You can tag Ralph on Twitter or on the Discord about that. I don't know if it ruined the show or not. We were doing great, and then we just went and did that. But, it is what it is. We still have Carson Beck as our number one quarterback in the SEC quarterback rankings. We'll talk to you next time, next week, in fact, live Monday night. We haven't decided the topic yet, but we will be there right here on the YouTube channel. Subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you think. My name is Bryce Koon. That was Palmer Toms. Ralph Larry in the background. We'll catch you next time here on Swarm Talk on the Crowded Booth.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.